Hello and welcome to Charlevoix Stories Project, a continuation of the Charlevoix oral traditions. Today is Tuesday, April 19th, 2016, and we are here in the Charlevoix Public Library in Charlevoix, Michigan. My name is Ann Kelly, and the videographer for today is Rick Pierpont of Pierpont Productions. And we are here to visit with Brian Neff and his sister, Marilyn Neff Gibbons, who are going to share some memories of their dad and their Uncle Bob, who started a very famous grocery store here in Charlevoix, which once stood where the Odemark Pavilion is in East Park. Neff's quality food store was famous for its quality meats and grocery items, but especially for their exceptional service and for their free delivery service, which none of the other grocery stores probably did so well in those days. So we would like to get going and find out a little bit first about your dad, Gordon, and your Uncle Bob. And I thought maybe it would be good to start with just kind of their backgrounds, because I know they both graduated from Charlevoix High School. And so that's kind of a good place to start, because their travels through life took them to that time in 1950 when they started a grocery store, but they certainly didn't have the grocery background. I know your dad was a bridge tender at one time, and Marilyn and Brian, why don't you kind of tell us about the boys?
Okay, first of all, I have an aunt, Edna Marie Neff Kennedy. She's passed away. She was the eldest child of Lance and Esther Neff. Then comes Gordon, and Bob was the baby. Gordon graduated in 1934 from Charlevoix High School.
Mm-hmm.
He played alto sax in the Charlevoix High School band. He was becoming a very good hunter and fisherman. Bob played the drums in the Charlevoix High School band.
Musicians.
He graduated in 1936. He was a football player, and Bob was more social than Gordon.
Really?
Gordon liked the woods.
Okay.
And Gordon left Charlevoix and went to Western State University. Michigan State University was called Michigan Agricultural College, and he studied forestry there for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then he left. He left because my mother wouldn't marry him. And he hopped a train with one of his buddies, college buddies, headed for Alaska.
Whoa.
Freight train.
Okay.
And he got to Seattle, Washington.
To mend his broken heart.
He got to Seattle, Washington, and my mother sent him a wire saying she changed her mind.
Well,
So
that's a good thing.
So
because
he
you two are
came
sitting
back
here, right?
and he graduated from the Detroit Business College.
Okay.
And he was very adept with his fingers. And they used to teach something called stenotype. And he could take stenotype at 220 words a minute.
Stenographer.
Yes.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But he never worked as a court reporter. He became the secretary to the chief of police in Detroit. And then he applied for the FBI. And he had 3 children. My sister Karen was the baby,
Okay.
and Brian and Karen were premature babies. And so when he was approved for the FBI, this was during the war, he was told that he would have to be working internationally. And he said he couldn't do that because he had 2 premature babies. So they said, "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Neff. You'll be receiving your draft notice in 3 months."
Ouch.
So they left Detroit and came home to Charlevoix. My dad was from Charlevoix, my mother was from Chicago.
Right. Now later on he became a bridge tender, right?
Then he took the job working for the railroad, turning the railroad bridge in Charlevoix for 5 years.
For 29 cents an hour.
29 cents an hour. And you said that he was supporting a family with that
His 3 children, yeah.
And he bought the house on Upright for like $8,000 back then.
And
That was right next door to his parents.
that was like $1 million when you're
Oh,
making
yeah.
29 cents an hour, right?
Lance and Esther Neff lived at 216 West Upright,
Okay,
and we were raised at 214.
okay. Now what about Uncle Bob?
Uncle Bob graduated from Charlotte High School, and then he went to the police academy, Michigan State Police, and he worked with the Michigan State Police for 10 or more years. And then he gave that up when Gordon and Bob bought Milt Black's grocery
Bob
store.
was last post was Newberry. Then him and my dad and Bob went in business together.
Right, and that was 1950, right?
That's
When
right.
they built. Now, at that time, there were other grocery stores. Is that right? Martin Block was the one that he bought.
Right,
Neff's
well, there
from.
was another block down by the bridge
Okay.
where that Polly K ended up.
Right on the corner there.
The last
Yes,
building,
the last building,
that was Martin Block.
and that was a different block than the one that had the Neffs.
Milton Black.
Okay,
They bought the store from Milton Black.
and there was a Kroger
Milton
downtown.
and Pauline.
Okay, there was a Kroger downtown too on Bridge
Kroger
Street,
was where Mettler's ended up.
and A&P.
Right.
A&P is across the street.
And Supernaut store.
Okay, and Edwards on the north side, right?
Yes.
So that was a lot of grocery competition for
Dutcher
a
and
small town.
Johnson.
That's what Martin Block's became.
Okay. Dutcher and Johnson.
And then Supernaut store was
Gibault
on
store.
where that lady has an interior design studio
Okay,
across from what we called the Blue Post.
okay.
The Blue Post Inn is now State Farm on the corner of Upright and Bridge Street.
It's really.
It's a brand new State Farm.
Okay, yeah. and
Across the street is Supernaut.
It's always interesting to know what's come before. That's especially true about the
Right.
for Neffs. Now that it's gone, unless we talk about it and tell about it,
Right.
no one will even know in
Right.
another
they,
10 years what that was about. So that's why this is really important today.
That's
I think.
Billy Supernaut's dad.
Okay.
Arlene Blissett.
Henry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Henry.
Okay. Sure.
Then there was Gibault's grocery store,
On
which
Lincoln
is
Street.
on Lincoln. And then what now is Andy's, back in those days, was Russell's
Okay.
store. And before that, it was what?
Brant's.
Brandt.
Okay.
Then where Nanny's is, on that property where the Irish is, that was the Charlevoix Co-op.
Okay.
It
So
was-
I'm just hearing about all of these grocery stores, and I'm thinking, we have two now, right? Olson's and Family Fare, and I'm thinking that's competition, but that was a lot. So when your dad and Uncle Bob started Neff's, they had to have an edge. And now I think from what we're talking about, Marilyn, that edge was really catering to the resort people
And the boat people.
and the boat people, and doing this service with a smile on delivery, free delivery.
Well, they also had
That was-
charge accounts.
And charge accounts would be real important, wouldn't it? For locals as well, I'm
Right.
sure. I'm sure. So, okay, so tell me about Neff's was the first, Marilyn. We talked about the first it was. It was the first Spartan store. Can you tell us what the
The
others?
first Spartan store in northern Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the first one to carry Reese.
Yes.
Why was that important?
Well, because of the resort trade.
Ta-ta, Reese cocktail
So
products.
people would come from Harbor Springs
Uh-huh.
to shop at Neff Brothers
Okay.
so that they could buy the Reese products.
All right. And then Sanders.
The Sanders candy. They were the first. They were the first store to sell Sanders candy outside of the family, outside of the Sanders family.
And that was down in Detroit.
That's right.
And your dad had to build a special cooler,
No, they had to buy one.
buy a special cooler
Yes.
to keep them at a certain temp.
Yes.
So that was pretty
The
popular
thing
item,
we
huh?
forgot in the article
Yeah.
is that they also sold Feltzer meats in the summer. This was very expensive
Oh.
beef product.
And where did that come from?
Chicago, of course.
Oh, sure.
They sold all the top shelf foods, like Marilyn said, Reese and other companies. They even had, at that time, the ocean turtle soup, which like in the late 70s, they stopped in America to sell the sea turtles. Other countries still have it, but my dad had that and the best caviar and all the best of the best.
And the Maine lobster were flown
That's
in.
right.
And Washington State.
Well, we had a customer who wanted only Washington State apples.
Yeah, I love the
And
fact
the only
that
way he could get the apples for the man was to order it, whatever. And they were flown in.
So you can see, or I can see, or we can see that all these specialty things
Yes.
was the thing that attracted the wealthy clientele.
Well, they catered
Especially,
to people.
and they catered to people. So who were some of the famous people that popped by?
Oh,
I think
well,
we have,
Nathan Cummings owned the Anchorage, but he used to come in.
okay.
Jacob Javits was visiting one of the wealthy customers
He was a senator from New York.
from New York.
Okay.
Henry Ford II came in one day, walked right back to the meat counter, wanted to meet the owners.
Neat.
Very nice.
R.E. Old shopped there, and I think that's the man that my dad told me when he introduced me to him. I was little, and my dad said, I shook his hand, and my dad said, "This is R.E. Olds," and I said, "That's okay."
That's when he probably didn't get the full concept of that guy with the car.
And then,
We never, it was often used as a reminder not to do that.
oh yeah. But then Mr. Rothschild used to always come in, and you would never know that he was the wealthy man that he was. You would just, he was so down to earth and so much like everybody else.
That's the wonderful thing about
Well,
Charlevoix,
that's the
don't
people,
you think
the
so?
people who really
Sure.
are well-to-do.
They don't put on airs.
No,
Right.
they don't.
And
It's
you
a
had
name for
some,
that,
who's-
nouveau riche.
yeah, right. That's the ones that,
We
they
try to
have to
stay
show
away
it.
from that.
Absolutely. Who's Joe Foy? He was another
Joe
one that
Foy
you
was
mentioned.
the president of Spartan Stores.
Okay, and there were Sanders Candy Execs and Gordon Kleinman.
He was, yeah, you don't have it spelled right in the article.
Uh-oh.
You have Klein.
Oh, I don't. Okay, well, we'll have to.
It's okay. He's probably dead.
Oh, good. He can't
Yeah.
call me up and point that out. Huh?
Klein, he was the president of Grand Rapids Produce.
Okay, that was
You
another
see,
big
everything
thing.
had to be trucked in here.
Oh, sure.
And there was no air conditioning in the 50s in Charlevoix.
So,
I think the first air conditioning in Charlevoix was at LaCroft.
okay.
But at Neff Brothers, there was no air conditioning, so people would check the temperature.
Oh, right. You told me that there
Yes.
was a resort lady who had sent
A
sent
lady.
the chauffeur in
That's right.
to check. Is the temperature right? Can I
Yes.
come in?
Right.
What was the criteria?
If the temperature wasn't right,
Oh,
then my dad sat in the back of the limousine and took her order.
okay. What
I could
about
still see her.
this Johnny Philip Morris who often,
You didn't want that in the ad. I figured it was because you were against smoking.
Well, that isn't true. It's just that I figured that this was kind of a little quirky thing that would be fun to talk about now.
Johnny Philip Morris, I think he was a midget,
Okay.
and he used to travel the United States of America
Uh-huh.
and put on a little show.
Okay.
Remember when he came there? And my dad had to have a stage built because he was so short.
Sure.
And then he stood up on the stage and he had an outfit on
Yeah.
and some kind of a funny little hat.
Yeah.
And then he would sing out about Philip
Johnny
Morris.
Philip Morris something, Philip Morris Ray, something like that.
So how long did his show go on?
Maybe a half hour.
Oh, that's funny. And probably a lot of curious people came and
Right.
stood around, huh?
Yes.
It
It
was
was advertised that he was coming to town.
Okay.
right.
Now, the North and South American were
They were
big
wonderful.
ships. And did they
Yes.
come in and do shopping? often?
Yes, the people were allowed to come off.
So those are huge, humongous.
They threw money overboard out
Really?
on the docks, and
used
all
to-
the little
every kid in
kids
town
in
was
town
down
would
there.
be down there. trying to get change, whatever they threw.
That's sort of
So-
like in Venetian, they throw candy.
yeah.
Forget that.
Right, no, it was dimes.
Oh my gosh. And then there was
It was down by where the Beaver Island boat is now.
That's where they
That's
docked.
where they parked.
Right,
Okay.
and where the weather vane is now, that when I was little, that was the Argo Milling Company.
Right.
And I never forget when down where Ward's is at the other end, you could rent a boat for like 25 cents for all day for a rowboat. And this other kid and me, right below the water in front of the weather vane, you could look down on the bottom and there was these wagon wheels that were off an old wagon that the horses pulled like a carriage, and they were about this tall. And this other kid and me got a rope and a hook. We rented a rowboat and we fished them out of the water. And then Earl Young was getting that property to build. He wanted the wheels, but we were little kids, you know, we said we got salvage rights.
Oh,
So,
and you said that to Earl Young.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so I still have the wheels.
That's
And,
a real treasure. The Historical Society would probably like to have those for the museum sometime.
Yeah, someday.
Yeah, someday. So then Jim Beam had
I talked to John Haggard on the weekend. And when he was young, he used to work as a bartender at the Weather Vane.
Okay.
And he called me up and he liked the article. The Haggards are like part of our family.
Okay.
The Gibbonses and the Haggards were all raised together.
Okay. So what
And
about,
John said,
yeah.
I'm blocking it out. Oh, he said the Jim Beam ship, and he told me the name of it, and I remembered it then, but I didn't write it down.
But it was the owner of Jim Beam's yacht.
Right, and that it was 105 foot,
Oh my gosh, just come
and it
in.
used to park. He said where the Beaver Islander is,
Yeah.
and he gave me the name of the owner. Somebody Bloom.
Okay. But
And I didn't write this down because I was doing something
Just
else.
about, well, Marilyn didn't mention this, but when my dad got out of high school, or during his high school years, where Brow's boathouse was, Camp Brow had that, it's this side of Cross's Fish Market. Arioles kept his boat in there.
No, that Arioles owned the boathouse.
Yeah, right, but he kept his boat there.
Yeah.
And Roy Ranger, that's Alvin Ranger's grandpa,
okay.
was the captain of the boat.
Realmar.
And my dad went on that boat with Roy Ranger and Arioles and them up through the North Channel into Canada one summer. And so that was quite a thing.
Quite the adventure.
Way back.
You know, Marilyn, you gave me a list of people that are local and who have achieved success in
Oh,
their
I
lives.
have it.
Do you want to use this one?
No, I have it expanded.
All right. And while you're getting that out, Brian, you worked at the store as well, right?
Right.
So I understand that there was quite a rigorous training that your dad and Uncle Bob did for employees, including the family members.
Yes, my dad had worked, that when he was born and all of his life was right after the Depression, when he was growing up.
Right.
So even when he went hunting back in those days, he would get his ammunition from Roy Ranger, who got it through R.E. Olds. But there was, if they took a shotgun and went for rabbits or partridge, you would only have 6 or 7 shells. So you better make sure you got something to eat,
Okay.
not waste the ammo. And then when he worked in Detroit, he also worked, besides doing the work with the police and all that, he worked in factories where they done production.
So he kind of
And-
had this work ethic.
Tool and die.
Tool and
The
die.
tool and die.
So he, growing up, he always tried to make you remember if you went downstairs to get something and you had something to take it down, don't make 2 trips.
Okay, efficiency.
And always know what you're doing and what you're going to be doing, so you follow through on everything. There's no excuse for incompetence.
What are some other training things that you remember,
Right.
Marilyn?
And
for the
it was, drilled into you.
All right. Did he
Not-
have like a morning meeting? Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Oh.
but during the day, if you goofed up, he might yell at you.
Okay.
It wasn't, let's put it this way. In our today's world, I noticed that my wife taught at the school in Petoskey for years, and they took away discipline in the school and discipline in the home. And it's sort of really affecting a lot of the children because nobody can make them do things. And
Hear,
it's
hear.
affecting them and their future.
Hear, hear.
So in a certain way, I wouldn't say to be abusive, but a certain amount of that should be, in which something that's happening with our kids. Marilyn's son come up from Savannah a couple of years ago, and he said that he noticed a lot of the kids that were born after 1985, they're not turning out very well. And these other children, and whether it would be China or Japan or other countries, they are achieving very high in the computer world and everything else.
Discipline,
But
right?
a lot of it's discipline, which our country has lost.
I think there's a lot of people, especially our age, that agree with you on that, because even now, a lot of the employers that I speak with when I'm doing business features say that it's hard to get good employees that
Right.
really want to work, and then to keep them, and that's part of the whole work ethic thing.
Well,
that,
I
you
would
know.
like to say something.
Yes, Marilyn.
I am a trained medical transcriber. I'm a trained legal transcriber. If they took spell check off the computer by the way I was trained and the way that I work, and I'm still working at 77,
Good for you. But that was your
if they would take
training.
spell check off the computer, over 50% of the secretaries in this country would not have a job. I do not use spell check. To me, spell check is something to be avoided.
Well, and it's making your mind work as well,
Well,
isn't
no,
it?
the problem is I have training, and
Right.
I don't deviate from my training.
And that's what your dad felt
And
real
I
strongly
verify
about.
things, and I proofread.
Right.
And if I have a mistake, 95% of the time I will catch it. But the problem is, these young women or men, whatever, are going into the marketplace, and they're not trained.
And do you think that was part of your dad's training too?
Exactly,
And for
yeah.
you
Well,
as
yeah.
well.
he's very
Very-
much on.
Pay attention. Pay attention.
and know what you're doing. And talk about this. Well, we'll get back to the list in a minute,
Well,
Marilyn.
see,
But
my dad, the thing was, most all the people that worked for him would say that my dad had, like Dee Dee Walker that from the Belvedere Club that came to the store, and his wife's father was John Olin Masterson, Winchester Arms. And my dad hunted with them, I hunted with them. My dad had all these people that were of high stature. And so he couldn't be like a fly-by-night place.
No.
And there had to be, everybody had to do their job and had to do it right.
very proper.
There's a millionaire in every cottage on the Belvedere, and don't you forget it.
And you have to, especially back when the grocery store was there, you
Right.
knew the name of all of the,
No, everybody in town.
everyone in
First
town.
of all, we had to learn who lived in every house in town.
Okay, because you were
Okay.
going to be delivering there.
That's
But
and you
right.
better be
Or there's
respectful, right?
possibility.
I've even run into a few months ago an Indian girl that lived up on Carpenter Avenue, and they didn't have anything. But she told me that she rode home in my dad's delivery truck.
He was kind. He was kind. And Jimmy Bogart, you mentioned, Marilyn, is one of the people
Jimmy
that,
Bogart worked at Neff Brothers.
that he
I didn't put him
Right.
on the list.
They treated him just like he was
Right.
one of their family.
Right, and he was,
And he was a little bit not normal.
He was developmentally disabled.
right, but your dad and Uncle Bob were kind people and saw that he had a talent that he could use. And that was, whether it was stocking the
Right.
shelves or whatever he was doing.
Do you know Phyllis Elzinga?
I know the name. I do not know her, no.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh,
They live on May Street, I think it is.
okay,
It's that he was her relative.
okay. Well, who's on this list?
Well, this
This is
list,
a huge list.
this list is full-time summer employees
Okay. I know
and
that,
part-time.
that Ron
and
Winchester
part-time.
called you, right? And said,
He
I was
called it
one of,
added, yes.
yeah,
Okay, now these are people who were hired by Gordon or Bob,
Okay.
probably Gordon.
okay.
Okay, the first one is Elaine Edwards. We're going back, this is from 1950
Uh-huh,
to around 1970 when my
Okay.
dad retired.
okay.
Bob Bartlett, Alvin Ranger, Dino Davenport, Tom Erber, Joe Etienne, Billy Supernaw, Scott Supernaw, Sam Supernaw, Kenny Whitley, Raymond Schultz, Roger Knudsen, Sina Bergman, Francis Boss, Jimmy McCann, Doug Cody, Catherine Neff, Eleanor Neff, C. Marilyn Neff, G. Brian Neff, Karen Neff, Linda Neff, Nancy Neff, Larry Smith, Ron Winchester, Quentin Walker, Charles McDonald, June Riley, Polly Verwise. Those two ladies used to come January 1, 9 o'clock, Sunday, whatever, it was for New Year's Day, and they did the inventory for the store. And now Polly has passed away, and June Riley is close to 100. Ronald Grunch, Larry Messmore, Larry Ingalls, Michael Gibbons, George Verwise, and Jimmy Verwise. Then Ron Winchester called me, that's okay. Ron Winchester called. And after my dad sold out to Uncle Bob, my dad, they had a strike at Spartan stores, and there were no deliveries. And my dad had to take a truck and go to Grand Rapids and pick up stock. And he did this like 2 or 3 times a week. And finally, he had a heart attack down at Bellinger Marine, and he almost died. So then he sold out to Uncle Bob. Now these are the people that work for Uncle Bob.
The meat cutters?
No, these
Or
are the workers.
the workers, okay.
Gary Forberg, Gail and Brenda Forberg, Andy Taylor, Ted Shantz, Randy Winchester, Jim Marshall, Mark Gallagher, Ron Winchester was the last delivery boy. And then Uncle Bob had Sam and Scott Supernaw's dad, Bill Supernaw, working in there doing produce. And then I have another list of all the butchers. Uncle Bob came from the state police. He didn't know anything about meat cutting, but there was a butcher there left over from Mr. Block, and his name was Mac McCarthy. He lived up on Bridge Street, and I remember him. And he's the one who taught Uncle Bob how to cut meat. Then they had Mike Hamlin, Jim Kruick, Ed Klooster, John Smith. John Smith was there 25 years. and Sam Cerna. And then Ronnie Winchester told me there was a guy from Melanson, George something, Polish name.
Okay.
But he said he couldn't remember his last name.
Who came up with that sausage recipe, the potato sausage?
That's Uncle Bob.
Uncle Bob.
Uncle Bob was a very good cook.
But that's, I think a potato sausage is a Swedish potato sausage that come from our family.
Yes.
And then
So either my
Uncle
grandmother-
Bob used to do a big barrel, like a 55-gallon barrel of pickles every year.
I was going to ask what
In
some
the
of the
store.
specialties were. Before we finish with that potato sausage,
We have, Brian makes that.
I know we make it today, and why don't you tell us about who these girls are? They're holding some of that, and it's
Well,
the
these
same
are my
sausage.
granddaughters.
Okay.
And this is Brooke, Elizabeth, and Heather.
And they're in some Swedish
They're in
outfits?
Swedish costumes that belong to my grandma.
Okay.
And my mother, didn't you used to wear them when you were little?
Yes.
And then she had my granddaughters, my daughters wore them, and now this is my granddaughter's.
That's from Traverse the magazine.
Traverse the magazine. It's featuring you, and you're still putting out this potato sausage, right?
Yes.
Now, how can people get this? I mean,
Well,
do you have a store up there, or is this by appointment?
No, I have when I first left Neff Brothers, I worked for them. I started when I was 12. And at that time, was right when, after they had first opened, they used to get all their chickens and poultry and stuff from the farmers, and they had a butcher room in the basement of the store.
Now, this is interesting because I was talking about the physical layout of the store, and the basement came up, and there was the place where they butchered the chickens. I
Right.
can only imagine. There was a sauna down there. Tell me about that.
That was later.
That was later.
Later. I'm trying to picture butchering in a sauna going on.
I think they used some of the stuff that was left from where they dunked the chickens in the hot water to make the sauna
Okay.
later.
Okay.
But after years went by. But at the time when they first opened, a lot of your stores were not getting chickens like they do in the cases,
Right.
all iced down.
Right.
So that's the way they first started out. And then they also had in their meat room electric fish scaler, and they would get fish from Beaver Island, perch and that, and whitefish and stuff from Charlie Martin or Cross, and then we filleted them downstairs and sold them in the store.
Okay. And there was an electric conveyor belt down there,
That was to take groceries up and down.
No, that was like an elevator.
like an elevator. Okay.
It was
Yeah.
open.
It was a
An open
conveyor belt.
elevator.
You entered that on your own risk because it was on pulleys.
Right.
You push
They
the
had a
button.
conveyor that come up, then they also had an elevator, but they didn't like to use it a lot because if the belt slipped, you could go down the whole flight with not, you would hit pretty hard if it went like from up there to the floor.
I would think so.
So they didn't use that very much.
No, they had a conveyor
Then-
from the street.
Okay.
From the street.
Now tell me about
You like that trap door.
In later life, they went to all the things through Spartan stores and the meat and poultry and everything, and they bought a lot of stuff from Farmer Pete, which would deliver to the store. And I worked for them for 9 years. Then I went in the service, and then when I come back from the service, I worked for them a little bit one summer.
But you went to meat school.
Then I went downstate to this meat school for it was in Detroit, and then I worked at Farmer Jack's, and after I got through with the meat school, I was with Farmer Jack's and A&P a little bit, then Giant built in Traverse City, and that was around 1966.
I bet your Uncle Bob was proud that someone was following in his footsteps.
He wanted me to get out on my own,
Okay.
and so
Encouraged you along
right,
those
and so
lines.
it didn't mean that I couldn't come back to the store someday, but I needed to get out and learn a trade and grow up in the world. So then I was with Giant from 1966 till they went out in 1995.
Okay.
But I
In
worked.
Petoskey.
I had to serve a 4.5-year apprenticeship to be a journeyman meat cutter.
Okay.
Then I worked in the Travers store, and the Big Rapids store, the Mount Pleasant Giant, the Midland Giant, the Bay City Giant, the Saginaw Giant. Then they had other stores because Giant had merged with Ray's Food Fair. So I worked in some of their stores. So I worked in Ludington, Elma, and other places there. Then the Cadillac Giant, and then they had a grand opening. I worked a lot of grand openings, and then they opened a new store in Alpena, Midway they called it, but that was through Ray's Food Fair, but I went for that grand opening.
So how did you get into Petoskey?
Well,
and
then
doing
in
what
1971 they built the Petoskey Giant,
Oh, okay.
and they would not let me come there if I wasn't going to be the meat manager. I didn't want to be the meat manager. All I wanted to do was cut meat.
Okay.
But they knew that I was, through my father, everything was drilled into me.
Sure.
There's no excuse for incompetence.
So right
And-
now,
Well, then I ran that market for 12 years.
Okay.
And the only reason I quit was the meat manager made 30 cents an hour more than the helper, $12 a week. But if you had a meat cutter that had worked 3-4 hours overtime, he made more than you. So it wasn't, that's just the way it was. And so after 12 years of that, I went back to cutting meat. But every time they needed a new boss, then I would run it till they got a new one. And so I stayed on with them until they went out of business in '95. By that time, I had like 29 years in the union. And and then I had inherited my dad's heart problems.
Okay.
So I had already been in the hospital and I had stents and balloons. And so, but in 1971, right around there, we built our home on Atkins Road. Have you ever gone to Petoskey?
Sure.
Do you know where Bill's Farm Market is?
Yes, I do.
If you look out of his and over to the next road over, that's
So way
where
up
we
there,
are.
huh? Nice.
Mitchell and Atkins both run east and west.
Okay.
And
So do you do your work out of your home?
Well, in the early 70s, I went, when we built the home, I went to the state and federal and everything, and I was licensed to process farm animals and make sausage. And the same as if I was Delker Meats and Gaylord or Circle M Ranch or a meat processor. The only thing is, over all those years, being that I worked at the store, I never run big ads. I never had any employees. My kids helped me and my wife, and we were locally known.
No.
Then in '89, I had some health issues, so I quit doing that for a while. And
But he built a meat room on his house.
we built a meat room in our house, just like in the store, and we have a walk-in cooler built in the, just like in
Neff
the
Brothers.
store. We have a commercial stuffer, just like in the packing house, and commercial
Well, I can
vacuum packer.
see why Traverse Magazine found it a very curious and wonderful thing to
Right, yeah.
explore. Good for
He
you. Good for
processes
you.
deer.
And they,
Oh, dear. Okay.
yeah, I did. Well, when I first started, I would go to the farms and butcher their beef and pigs and stuff like that. And then I made their sausage and smoked their hams and bacons and everything. And then I quit in '89 because of health issues. Then the store went out in '95, and I had ended up with more heart problems. And so by 2002, um, I my heart doctor encouraged me to do something, Dr. Ming. So I made sausage for people, and the other friends of mine that cut up the deer and stuff would send me the sausage people.
Okay.
And then my friend, they passed on. So then we decided to, my oldest daughter and granddaughter's help, and sometimes my son-in-law and my grandson, and they that helped me. So we would do the deer and elk and moose and bear and everything.
Well, like I said, I bet Uncle Bob is smiling down.
Right.
Marilyn, getting back to what the physical store in Neff's was like, I understand there was some lunch like a lunch counter where people could have lunch there?
No.
There wasn't.
No.
There were
No,
some stools?
never.
But to
I don't know where I
sum
picked that up.
My situation,
Oh, okay.
after I went back and done that in 2009, the Travers magazine came to me and wrote the article, which we were very honored.
Sure.
And Dr. Ming's come to my house, who was the heart doctor in Petoskey, very nice man, and brought me his deer, and he came in.
Who was that?
And he had a big smile on his
Who was
face.
that?
And Dr. Mings. He was
Oh,
my
yeah.
dad's doctor. And he saw the people there. And he goes to me, "This is just what you needed." And actually I could cry, because when it wouldn't matter whether it was me with heart problems or anybody, when you get older, everybody wants to feel useful.
Of course.
And so that's why when they wrote the article with the Travers magazine, I was very happy and hoped that in some way I could impress upon anyone that's retired to,
Or
if they
rehabilitating,
don't
yeah.
have a trade, then do volunteer work or something
Gives you a
to
purpose.
get you going, to give you a purpose.
That's a wonderful.
Than to sit and look
Yeah.
out the window.
Yeah. I was thinking
And-
about your dad. After he retired with health problems, he started carving.
Right.
And that
he
was his
did.
way to Marilyn, tell us a little bit about your dad's carving.
Oh, his carving. He started out with seagulls, little tiny ones. And he would go around and sell these little birds. And then maybe he would try a different bird. Then he was getting more bird books. Then he was spending more time. Then he got to the point that he would load up his car. They had a Buick. And he would load that up with birds, and they'd take off for the UP or wherever.
And he was in his element because he always
Yes.
loved the woods, right?
Well, he liked
Right.
the people.
And the
You
people.
see, that is what has happened to this family, the Neffs. We were raised to be social people, to be helping other people. All my life I have done that.
Right.
It's very hard for me. I maybe the reason I've adjusted to living in the senior housing is because I see people.
Sure.
And I feel very sorry for people who have not had that training.
Well, part of the ethic in working for that store, too, was how did you feel about that catering to the wealthy people? Did that seem to be
What do you
kind
mean?
of, well, you know, like you would say
No,
that
it's-
not only to bring them groceries, maybe they'd tell you to go
I
get
don't
stamps.
like the word catering.
Well,
It was our livelihood.
I know that,
Right,
but I mean,
but-
didn't you have to do extra things that maybe you normally wouldn't? Like with the groceries, they might ask you to go get some stamps, like you said, or something.
Well, there was a few cottagers that pulled that.
There was I remember, because I delivered groceries to the Belvedere Club, Chicago Club, and up on Michigan Avenue. And most of your older people were very friendly and very polite and just wonderful people. I did have one time a kid, I was going to put groceries in this Lincoln, and the kid slammed my hand in the car door on purpose. And later all of the nails on my fingers fell out. But it was some of the kids, when they have everything and are raised where they might not even have to, some families, it all depends on the individuals. they may not have the manners and they're spoiled. It's just, that's the way God made all of us, and we, every one of us thinks different and does things different. So,
Right. What about that your dad said,
Let
I guess
me-
in training about the
Let me tell you this.
Okay,
I'll tell you about the store.
okay,
First of all, there was no air conditioning,
okay,
all right, in Charlotte. There was one telephone line. The number was LI7 6541.
still
I
in
just
your-
yes.
Yes,
One line. We had to be there at 8 o'clock. God help you if you weren't there by 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, the phone started ringing. People calling in their orders. Belvedere. Chicago Club, not so much. Michigan Avenue. Park Avenue was Park Avenue, but it didn't have as many summer people as Michigan Avenue. The ladies from the Belvedere usually would come in. You don't speak to these people until you're spoken to. You say good morning, and they'll answer you. If they want to talk to you, they will do that. If they want you to push the cart, they will do that. They will say that. When you say catering to them, we call it taking care of them.
taken care of, okay. We'll reword
Okay.
that one.
All right?
And,
The Belvedere ladies would come in the morning.
uh-huh.
They get their groceries, but we deliver. They don't take the groceries out.
Did you put them in the cupboard? When
Yes, we did.
When you got to the other
occasionally.
end? Okay.
Especially the boats.
Uh-huh. Now, but didn't Uncle Bob have to row out there to get some
He did.
collection
Couple
sometimes?
times, yes.
Mhm.
Yes, I was afraid that had been overdone in the thing because it didn't happen often.
Okay.
I was there the day he went
Uh-huh.
in the rowboat.
Uh-huh. That was very occasional.
Now, the way
thing.
that happens,
Mhm.
maybe the boat calls and puts in their order. They send somebody up to pick it up.
Right.
We give them the groceries.
Right.
We don't get the money.
Right.
So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so will take care of this. Well, that's not good enough
Mm-hmm.
because we can't be standing there when the store is closed 7 o'clock at night
Right.
wondering who paid and who didn't.
Right. Right. So, tell me about the rolling checkout because that was kind of a new invention. Is
That was
right?
R. Yole's son-in-law that
Okay.
invented that. His name is George Smith.
Okay.
This lady's name is Bunny Rowe Smith. And George Smith lived at Boulder Park. And he invented the rolling checkout, and he came into Neff Brothers, and he was a famous man, but not on that list,
Mhm.
and talked to my dad about ordering up a rolling checkout. And he did. It was the hit of the town.
I guess. Was that the
Have you
first
been
and
to
only?
Neff's and seen the rolling checkout?
No,
Now,
I
when you go to Olson's and you see the rolling checkout,
don't think too much about it, huh?
no, but that's who invented it.
That's neat. Sort of like you don't think about the elevator and Otis. Huh?
Now, Thursday was Maid's Day Out. So all the ladies from the maids from the Belvedere, they'd get all dressed up Thursday morning,
Mhm.
and they'd come down to Neff Brothers and say hello to all of us, and then they would go and sit in the park for the day. It was a very nice time to grow up in Charlevoix.
I think so. It sounds like it was genteel. Is that a
Yes,
good word
it
for
was.
it? Yeah.
In your article, one thing I noticed, I don't think you mentioned, but see, when where the depot is now,
Mm-hmm.
when you come down the hill to the old depot,
Yes.
right before you turn to go in the Coast Guard station,
Yes.
there was a restaurant there.
Oh, I did not know that.
And it's gone. And it was
Yeah.
a guy named Swan and Margaret. And they were Anderson, and they were friends of my mom and dad's. In fact, my dad and I tore that building down.
Huh.
And we used the lumber in a house my dad had on Pavishon Lane.
What kind of a restaurant was it?
Um,
It was a hamburger place.
Okay.
And we used
That
to go
was-
down there for ice cream.
In the summer, they cater to the people going to that beach.
Sure.
And Swan and Margaret worked for Mrs. Ely on the Chicago Club.
Okay.
And Mrs. Ely was a millionaire, of course. And she had a cat. And when she died, Swan told us that the trust fund was set up for the cat. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And the cat had a special house
Yeah.
and special everything.
Wow. Well,
That was
people
in her
should
will.
be treated so well.
And
Huh?
I remember because we had out of that restaurant when I was little, we had like these little machines that you make chocolate malts with,
Oh,
you know,
lots
and
of
stuff
milk
like that,
machines.
and all this stuff. Yeah.
Oh, what fun. Marilyn, why don't you show this picture that shows the delivery truck and
Oh.
you greeting your Uncle Bob. Why don't you hold that up for
Well,
the
my dad is there,
Your dad's there too?
right here.
Oh, okay.
This
And
is
that's
this
Ike
is
Byers.
Ike Byers.
All right.
The first fellow in the truck that you see from behind the cab is Ike Byers, then my dad,
Okay.
then the lady with her back to you is my Aunt Trina Nelson,
Okay.
and she was the nanny for Albert Loeb. And then my sister Marilyn, and then my Uncle Bob's giving Marilyn a kiss.
Right.
And that's my dad's old car.
And Marilyn, I have to show this one because you're so cute with your boots.
Oh,
That's in front of this. Maybe you were at school, going to school or what? Coming
well, I've just probably been in there to work.
probably. And there you are, huh?
After school, I got 50 cents an hour.
Talk about
Yeah.
hey, and here's that railroad bridge, right?
Oh, yes.
I think that's pretty. That's 29 cents an hour while your parents were trying to make ends
Now,
meet, her for that.
I'll tell you about
$8,000 house.
this.
Okay.
See, there's a little house there.
That's my dad sat in that little house.
That's
That's
where the bridge
ran
tender-
the bridge.
The bridge
Yeah.
tender sat and kind of
Right.
it turned. It turned.
And then
I don't know what they're called exactly. Those kinds
What?
of bridges that
in the,
turn
if
like
you
that.
ever notice in
A swing bridge.
Charlevoix, a fellow that done a lot of really nice paintings, Jim Annis.
He was my neighbor. Yep.
All right, his Jim and his dad, Jim's dad and my dad fished on that railroad bridge in the summer between the times that the bridge would
Would
go.
open, huh?
And sometimes the water would be going into Lake Michigan, and other times the current would change and it was going the other way. But they caught, at least 1,000 bass during the summer back in them days. They released most of them.
And of course, later
Right.
on, Jim lived to paint all of these wonderful.
Right, yeah.
Fish. He
And
was quite the
Jim-
artist.
Young Jim, he's the son,
Right.
like I'm Gordon's son.
Right.
And Jim fished there also,
Oh,
and I
okay.
did too when I was
Okay.
little.
That's.
But-
uh-huh.
One time, my dad, we didn't have a car. This is in the 40s. This
Okay.
is after we moved from Detroit.
Okay.
And my dad got this job. And he used to ride a bike from Upright Street to the railroad bridge. And one night he had to go down there. He got a call, there was a train coming.
Mhm.
And he was on the bike going down, we call it Hooker's Hill, State Street Hill. And he wiped out. And he was so upset, he grabbed the bike and he threw it. And it flopped back into perfect shape.
Oh, that was a quick fix.
It what?
And it flopped back into the way it was supposed to be.
Oh.
After it was all upper
Now.
jangle.
One night, I'm the eldest, and I couldn't stand it that I couldn't go on that railroad bridge.
Well, but
And the
see,
circus was coming, going to Petoskey.
Uh-huh.
And so my dad told Brian, you could come to work with me tonight. And Brian got to go and stay in that little hut while the circus train went across the bridge.
Oh. And you were out of joint.
What,
Right.
see that train when you go out, the stairwell going out wasn't bad, but then you had to climb up a couple of them like this.
Oh, yeah, it would
And
be
then they
dangerous.
were like almost straight up and down, and then
What are you
That's a little
talking
tricky.
about?
to get up to the thing, you couldn't walk down the tracks to get on
Oh,
the
right.
bridge. So you had to go out on this railing and then
Let's see, he
climb
was just
up.
being protective
And
of you,
then
Marilyn.
Anyone could have fallen off of it.
Sure.
Well, they used to have a railroad station at the Belvedere.
I remember that.
Right.
No, not that you lived here.
No, I don't mean that, but people have told me about
Yeah.
that. When we were
Right.
doing the article with David Miles on the Chicago
Oh,
yeah.
Belvedere, he mentioned the fact that there was one over
Well,
there
my
too.
mother used to fix the supper, and Karen was the youngest.
Okay.
Put her in the wagon, and Brian and I walked all the way to the Belvedere Casino. And then my dad would turn the bridge, and we would walk over the bridge and go to the depot and have our supper, and then we would walk back home.
A lot of walking, good exercise.
Yes,
That's
walking across the bridge.
that's kind of scary, wasn't it? A little bit.
Yes, well, it was.
Yeah.
The goal was most important.
Well, yes, for sure. Listen, there's some plaques down in the park
Yes,
dedicated
there's 3.
because your parents dedicated gave 3 boat slips to the
No, not my parents. The Neff brothers.
the Neff brothers.
The Neff brothers.
All right.
The docks were behind Neff brothers.
Okay. And what do these plaques say on them?
Well,
Sort
I
of.
haven't been there since they were put in.
Okay. I should have taken a picture of those and
Right.
so I would know the wording. But it's in thanks
There's
for
a one for the city for people who have given property,
Okay.
items connected to the park, land, whatever.
And there were 3.
And there's another one that has to do with Wharfside and Neff Brothers. Jill Cross got that put in, Neff Brothers.
Okay. All right.
And then there's a third one. I guess that has to do with community.
So the progression after both Dad and Uncle Bob retired from the operation, it stayed a grocery store for a little while before it was sold to, or did it become Wharfside right away? Or
About
No,
that
no.
time, around the time that my dad was getting ready to get out, the economy had changed. They had built Big Rock around 58. Then Medusa was coming. And then where now there was a bar that's right down from, what's the name of that drugstore that Elaine worked at?
Central Drugstore.
Central Drugstore. That was called the Topside Bar. Now it's something else. But way back that was called Silver Birches.
right.
Then Medusa was coming. The economy was getting better. A place was called Peterson Real Estate that was upcoming in those days, and everything was turning around from what it had been. And so they built the Topside Bar, and there was all these changes. And then in between all this, my dad got where he couldn't do that no more. And then my Uncle Bob took over, and then shortly thereafter, through real estate and that, the store became whatever it was towards the end.
Peterson
and
sold
my
it
mother-
to 4 people.
My mother wanted my dad to only sell out his share of the business, but keep his stock in the building and rent to my uncle. But my dad wouldn't do that, and this is many years ago, so we don't know whether they discussed it or not. But if they would have kept their share of the building later on, maybe when it was sold at the end, the family might have benefited from it. Along with all that, during the course of those years, the city charged my uncle and my dad taxes on the docks.
After they were donated?
No,
For 15
for
years.
Then, but nobody
They won't
ever
own up
pushed.
to it.
They never pushed the issue to get any of the money back.
Well, I went down there to see if I
they-
could.
I never had anything to do with it.
I went.
Didn't you have a good lawyer to do that?
Yes. Oh, he was gone.
Okay.
It didn't matter. It's just.
Things were run a little
Yeah,
bit
when
differently
my-
and maybe a little more loosely then, huh?
Right.
Not to
Here's
everybody's
a
benefit.
sign. Beer and wine. Take out. Not carry out.
Takeout.
Takeout.
When it was wharf side, we could call it
Right.
carry out.
That's right.
There we go. Now
But
there
they-
is the
Now
big
we got that
distinction.
all
We've
straightened
got it.
out.
I'm so glad.
Takeout.
When
Yes.
everything was
I
all
just
going
noticed
down,
that sitting here.
Okay.
rather than us be worried about the money from the docks or anything, I was just happy that the city could do something with it that would benefit.
No, I'd like to be
Charlevoix.
sitting down there collecting the rent.
I'm
Yeah.
sure. I'm
I
sure.
could take my lawn chair any day.
any day. Well, listen,
They make a lot of money on those docks.
I think we've probably covered most of the things we wanted to talk about today, but if you can think of anything else you'd
Well,
like
I
to
will
add
say
here.
here,
Mhm.
since it says beer and wine,
Okay.
it took them a long time to get that license.
Uh-huh.
And when they got the beer and wine license, things sort of changed.
Was that because you
Because
could only-
people would call them up, and there was one famous person in Charlevoix, called him up at 2 o'clock in the morning, called my dad. I want whatever,
At
beer
2
and wine.
in the morning?
Yes. And Dad went down to the store, opened up, got whatever the guy wanted, including beer and wine. And when he got up to the place, it was a summer person. There was a horse in the living room.
A horse.
A horse.
Oh.
Real horse?
Yes. The people had been partying all night.
Apparently so, and
Oh,
invited a
wow.
horse to the party.
It was Johnny Night.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And there was a horse in the living room. And then he locked my dad in the house.
Yeah, I
He
guess
brought-
your dad's first mistake was answering that phone.
Probably.
Now, that may have been after they got the liquor license.
Uh-huh.
They hadn't had that liquor license too long.
Okay. Well, interesting things. Huh?
I would
They-
just like to say in closing,
Yes.
it was a very wonderful childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there was discipline every ounce of your life. There's a certain way you behave, there's a certain way you stand back, there's a certain way you talk to people, you always help people, you stay out of people's way, you mind your own business. Yes, it all comes back to what Brian said. discipline.
Respect.
Respect
Right.
and
They,
discipline.
last year, I ended up in May having chest pains, and I already had 8 stents and 8 balloons in me. So I went in and they done an EKG. I was fine. Then I went in a week or so later. The same thing. I was fine. Then at the end of May, one day the pain was so awful. I took a nitro. And I already had these 8 stents and 8 balloons. So I told my wife I felt better. I'd been laying down in the bedroom, and I went in, and they kept me overnight. And the next morning, the Dr. Schul done the heart cath, and he goes, "You're 98% blocked. And if you leave, you're a dead man." And when they he was upset because after Dr. Mings retired, they took me off from regular Lipitor and Benicar and put me on generic medicine. In 1 year's time, it
All
blocked
clogged up again.
everything. So then they had to wean me off from that blood thinner. Then they done the open heart. Then I code blue on them and I was dead. They brought me back. Then they made me lay there for another 20 some days. So it was like almost a month and a half. And then they was going to put me in a nursing home. And I couldn't walk from here to you. And my wife took me home. And first 2 days I had stayed downstairs, and then I managed to get upstairs. And then every day I walked on the deck. And by the end of the month I was going down the deck 40 times a day. And then I just kept going, and 3 different heart doctors told me, we don't want you doing sausage. We don't want you lifting over 20 pounds. We don't want you to do any work for a year and a half. But by the end of September, I did 3 deer, but my daughter helped me. And by the end of October, I'd lifted 70 pounds, but it hurt where they cut me. So I backed off. And then between like the end of September and the first of the year, I cut up 30 deer and made sausage.
I would say that
But-
work is your best medicine.
Right, but I had
And you're sort
to,
of a blessed person.
I had to go like, if you see the old sign that shows the great blue heron flying with the frog in his mouth, and it says never give up.
That's you.
And so you
Good
should
for you.
always, and when I was in the Army overseas, we were always taught to never say die, never quit, never give up. So I had to keep going, and now I'm still doing that. And I encourage anybody, I don't care how old you are, to, no matter how it is, look at tomorrow, make the best of today. And I met a man that was very successful and wealthy, and I asked him one day, of all the things you have in life, what do you value the most over everything? And he said, God, my friends and family, and everyone I love. Money is only a tool to get through this world. Without that, you have nothing. There's a reason that God kept me here. And I think it's to inspire my grandkids and all of them for
I think it's for you to take
future
care
and
of
their
me.
education.
And be a good brother to the sister.
And to Marilyn.
Yes,
That there's a reason I'm here, because
there is.
when I was in the hospital, I could not believe the people that were praying for me and the ones that came and seen me.
That's wonderful.
This is memories of my dad and my uncle in Charlevoix from in the 50s until when were they out totally? Probably.
74 or 5, somewhere in there maybe.
And all their good years that they had, and the way to raise your children, and to maybe figure out how to get your life in order.
One thing that was very important to Gordon Neff are his kids that worked there in the summer.
That whole
He
string
always
of
used to
them.
tell me, anybody who worked for me and Bob turned out good. And as I was making this list, I was just sitting there. I don't have any employment records. Ron Winchester asked me if I had them all in order. I said, no, I don't have any employment records.
Right.
I just
That's
wrote
all
the
of your
name down.
memory.
I said, I
Yeah.
was sitting here. I just kept writing names.
And they all came to you.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Well, after I'd had the article written about me in 2009, I had a lot of people on the internet wanted me to send stuff, but I was not physically capable of mass producing stuff. But I did have a man once, I made all these sausages, and at Christmas he was a corporate attorney in New York, and he flew here in his Learjet and got these sausages for his office party.
Neat.
And then I had
Donald Trump.
another man from Germany take my sausage to Germany, the Landjäger, it's like hunter sausage. And he said my Landjäger was as good as the Germans.
Wow.
And
Okay.
then
For a
about,
Swedish guy, that was pretty
right, a year ago, a man came and they were going to have 50 people run a plantation in Louisiana for a family reunion.
I know.
So they had me make the 25 pounds of andouille sausage and smoke it. And
That's that spicy one, right?
That's an Cajun sausage. But it's not real. There's different ways of doing it. Before I got out all my books, I called up a bunch of chefs that I know that are real chefs. And then I even called Pearl's Restaurant in Ellsworth, or Elk Rapids, and talked to them. Then I made the sausage, and they took it to Louisiana. They ate the whole 25 pounds, and the Cajuns said it was the best andouille they ever had in their whole life.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
but it's all the way you do it. And I used to do Everett Kircher's animals, and Lois Kircher and Kathy.
we're over in Boyne.
Right, and
Has
Art Tebow.
anybody learning how to do this now so it can
well,
continue?
I've got
or-
everything written down, and I've tried to, my oldest daughter, tell her, because we make some of the sausages we make that people in Bayview buy in the summer, but it's by special order, is breakfast sausage, bulk or length, Italian sausage, cherry brats, which are awesome, regular bratwurst, cheddar cheese and bacon
You better run a
bratwurst,
food truck this summer.
cheddar cheese and bacon bratwurst with jalapenos, and then some of our regular smoked sausage.
I bet your house smells really good.
Yeah, it does.
I'm
But
sure.
I only do it by special order, and then I sell the sausage in 5-pound packs. And when I get enough people to make the sausage, then I'll turn on the cooler, and I order my products through the same semis that deliver to the grocery stores.
Okay.
And I have been licensed through the state since the early 70s.
Great.
But when Travers Magazine wrote about me, I wanted them to put me down as Petoskey's best kept secret, but they put me down as the sausage guru.
Oh,
And
well, that ain't bad. There it is.